But if it's, you know what, man, if they're playing from the heart and they and importantly, they have some amount of facility on their instrument, which is important to me as a performer.
What do you mean by that? Facility on their instrument?
Amateurish playing really turns me off. And I'm not talking about basic stuff. There's a lot of, for example, classic country songs that are perfect songs that only have 3 chords in them.
Right.
So it's not about complexity. It's about the skill of the performer. And there has to be a certain amount of skill. And I've been, recently in the last 10 years or so, I've heard some modern performers that can barely play their instruments. And it's a little irritating. Or worse yet, in the days of technology that can make you literally sound perfect right in the heart of the pitch, they still sing out of tune and then release a recording that's out of tune. Like, that's kind of inexcusable from a professionalism standpoint. But I think if they're playing with emotion and they're playing from the heart and they have some skill and there's some amount of thought gone into the composition and the arrangement, fine.
What do you think's more important, lyrics or music?
I think they're equally important.
Equally important.
I mean, you have to remember that lyrics, lyrics as we think of them is really poetry that goes with a piece of, sound, music. And I feel like one of the things that distinguishes a really good song that has vocals is that the poetry can stand on its own and the music can stand on its own. If you hear a Music version of that song where a violin is playing the melody, it's still a good song. Okay. And you hear the poem by itself being read without being sung, and it's still a good piece of writing. You've got something there.
Okay. I've always felt that when you have good musicians that write things to have a mass appeal in one way or another, I always feel like they've always, not on purpose, but they've always indirectly been a kind of ambassador. I think that's part of, if you hit your good music thing, I think you become an ambassador whether you want to or not.
Right. And also, there's a little bit of science to it too, Mark. There are certain consonant sounds and certain chord progressions and certain timbres of instruments that humans tend to find more pleasing and less pleasing. And the science of sound, there's a really great documentary with Bobby McFerrin, who I believe lives in Chestnut Hill, famous jazz singer. Yeah. He and another guy, a scientist, musician, did a whole thing about the science of music where they talk about this. But there's certain things, they have little babies and they play consonant and dissonant intervals to them, and the babies react differently. And, what makes a song catchy? What makes a song sticky? Sometimes, as a person who can hear inside of the score, sometimes I can tell you exactly the moment that makes a song catchy. Your theme song, for example. Sly starts out in his kind of sing-songy voice. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're right. But when it gets to the release, it sings Everyday People, he's way up in a completely different timbre of voice, and it changes, and it goes back and forth and back and forth. And then they have that sing-songy little part that sounds like a playground chant. Na, 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 right. Na. Everybody knows that, right? That's not the point. The point, the part that makes, besides the groove, the part that makes that song special is when, I think, the moment is when he goes from his chest voice up to his Everyday People part. Because it's surprising. It's an unexpected thing that happens because there's that pulse going on and he's singing, in the lower part of his voice, and then bam, he jumps up to sing that's the moment that makes you remember that song. Sometimes it's really easy to find the thing that makes it catchy, and sometimes it's not. It's true in classical music too. You can hear a Mozart melody and say, well, that whole thing's really pleasant, but the fourth into the fifth measure is the unexpected spot, and that's the part that makes you keep listening.
Do you think that your love of music sometimes impacts your loving music? Because when you do something so much, you look at it differently. Just like you looked at that piece of music that I listen to every week and other times, and you look at it differently, you know?
Well, I hear it differently for sure. I think so. I think one thing that's fascinating is in all the time that I've been with my wife, we've only written 2 songs together. And you would think that a lyricist as good as she is and a writer as experienced as I am, we would have a lot more tunes. But honestly, I come home, I start with music at 7:30 in the morning and I finish at about 3, and sometimes later, if it's an afternoon rehearsal. The last thing I want to do when I get home is play the piano some more, or play the guitar some more, or play my trombone or whatever. That's the last thing I want to do.
So you write? Mm-hmm. You sing?
Well, I can sing harmony, but...
You play?
Mm-hmm.
So you do a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything. And you sort of have to, in my line of work as a director, I have to know enough about how to play all of those instruments that I teach in order to teach them.
But even just to go on the road, I've known people that have done it to a much lesser level, but you've got to, the more you can say, I can do that, the more work you have.
Right.
And you like eating and sleeping indoors, so you adapt and you learn.
That's right. Well, and again, any tour manager will tell you, if you can get a musician who can do 3 things, and you can save some money and not having to have somebody else do it.
Right.
So that's why you sometimes, if you watch, I don't know, there's some TV channels that have concerts on them, like Access TV or whatever. Sometimes you see, like, I don't know, big acts, and there'll be a guy kind of in the back keyboard, and you'll see a saxophone on a stand and a guitar. And on some tunes he's playing one, and some he just replaced 3 dudes. One guy replaced 3 dudes. They're out there.
How do you feel about digitally replacing people?
I understand it. From a financial standpoint, but I'm a huge booster of all live music, and if you can hire a musician, but I understand sometimes sometimes and that's another thing, when you're watching something and you hear an instrument that you don't see, that they're playing to a track. Someone presses play and the track plays and they play along, and here comes the string section. Oh, are they hidden under the stage? What are those strings?
Well, you see something. There's a couple apps that allow you to create music, and I think it's okay for creating little segues in videos, but not music as a whole thing. But I remember it was a Die Hard movie where they launched Crown Vic goes up out of a tunnel, takes out a helicopter, and everybody loved that scene. And it was the only thing that wasn't CGI. And somehow everybody really gravitated towards it because it was real.
Yeah.
In all of its imperfection. And I think that CGI and I think that digital music is sometimes too crisp, too clean. It's not. Reality is a little grittier.
Indeed it is. And that's why live performance is so thrilling.
What instrument thwarts you?
Challenges me?
Yeah.
Really? To try and play, you mean?
Yeah.
The double reed instruments, the oboe, the bassoon. I mean, I know fingerings on oboe and bassoon, and I can get a crow, but it really sounds like someone put a couple cats in a bag and beat it with a stick. It's just really horrible. But again, like if I have an oboe player, I can say, hey, why don't you use your forked F key? Here's an alternate fingering. Like, I'm all about knowing what to do with that.
Right.
Personally demonstrating it for them. I mean, I can pick up my trumpet and demonstrate for the trumpet player. I can demonstrate with the clarinet player, whatever. I keep a couple instruments by my stand if I have to do that. But those double reeds, man, that's a really special skill.
And with your band, do you travel with the band, or are you local? Mainly local.
We're mostly local. I think the furthest we have a gig coming up in Maryland next spring.
That's a little regional, at least.
A little regional, yeah. And we've played in New York, and we've played in Lancaster, and up in the Poconos, and regional. But I originally started it in 1996 because I was kind of tired of being a sideman. And I was winding up writing a lot of music for horn sections for other groups, and then going and playing. And, they were benefiting from that. I was doing all of this work and not really getting paid for it. And I thought, if I'm doing all this writing, why don't I put my own thing together and see what happens? And at the time, I thought about maybe putting together a R&B review, do a whole bunch of R&B, great old R&B tunes,
Right.
And then I also thought that I really loved the New Orleans brass bands, like the Dirty Dozen brass band. So I modeled my group after the Dirty Dozen brass band when we first started. Okay. And about 2004, we had a wedding where they were willing to pay us wedding band money, which is real money, but we had to play a couple of more poppy tunes. And I played bass well enough at the time. And the drummer said, yeah, I know those tunes. The guitar player said, yeah, I know those tunes. We played those tunes for him. And I really liked the sound of the bass with also the tuba, because originally the bass instrument had been a sousaphone.
Okay.
There was no bass, just like they have in New Orleans. And over the years, I've written a ton of tunes that sound, out of the same wheelhouse as the Dirty Dozen, and, arranged other tunes that I really liked for my group to play. It's really hard to have a 10-piece band of all those horns, and we have a good singer and everything, but it's a lot of mouths to feed, man. It's really hard to book that.
I know. I looked you up online, and I looked, and it was like, oh my God, it was like, it was like the cast of Hill Street Blues. It's like, how do you feed all those people?
Yeah. And again, we usually play at Chris's Jazz Cafe on Mardi Gras, and sometimes, we've played New Year's Eve there, and we've played the summer solstice at the Kimmel Center. We do events and stuff when they need a big thing. And we've had some pretty high profile gigs. 2008, the Philadelphia Flower Show, the beautiful thing they do at the convention center. They had a New Orleans theme, and they hired us to play 3 shows a day for like 8 days. And it was really amazing. Just kind of march like the marching bands through the street, playing New Orleans tunes, and then wind up on the stage. It was really great.
But it takes so much work before you can get to that level.
Yeah.
You have to go through so much. I mean, the whole starving artist thing isn't a myth.
It's not, but remember, I started the band the year before I got my job at the high school. So I've been doing this with a good day job ever since. So I'm not going to say always the gigs were, play money or gravy. Certainly, I played 10 years for 96 to 2006 in a really good wedding band that, was the band of 1,000 voices. They could do anything. There's a very expensive wedding band. 10 years with those guys. That bought a car, because those gigs paid the same as my car payment. So as long as I had 1 gig a month at least, and I had more.
But when you say the wedding band, you get like this 1,000-yard stare in your eyes for a second.
I'll tell you, I knew how I knew when it was over. With 10 years of doing it, I was driving to a gig in Cherry Hill on a Saturday night in my tuxedo, all ready to go to play, Boogie Oogie Oogie for the 20 millionth time. And I was thinking in my mind, like, what if I called the leader, what kind of excuse could I have for not doing this gig? Like, did my car break down? Did something happen? I was like, you know what, man, I know it's over. And I gave my notice that night. I just knew it was over.
And never looked back.
Not really. I'd have subbed, Every once in a while, people call me and I'll sub on one of them and stuff. But doing that regularly, just, I don't know. I wouldn't go so far as to say it sucks your will to live, but it definitely takes the shine off of what you're doing, Tunes that you used to really like Al Green, Let's Stay Together.
Yeah.
What a beautiful song. I played that 500,000 times. If I never have to play that again, that'll be great. Or hear it again, that would be great. And it kind of ruined it for me,
Have we stopped making musicals? Do we still make musicals?
Yes, they do. Oh my gosh. The Tony Awards were just, at the beginning of summer or the end of the spring. The ones that are going on now,
but not on Broadway. We used to do stuff that the average guy could see on TV.
Well, did you see they did a couple of live action musicals? Recently. I don't know how good those were.
Yeah, I don't think that we have the ability to see good musicals as the common person like we used to. We used to crank out some good musicals, and then...
Well, and also remember when we were coming up, Mark, they had those variety shows.
Yeah.
Where they would have, comedy,
anything.
musical act, guy spinning plates.
Yeah, juggling cats, whatever.
Yeah, well, America's Got Talent is our version of that now. But
now
it's a competition.
Yeah.